all gaboyim, and that is that even the people who come late want to leave on time. So we should get started. Of course, as usual, poskin b'chvod achsanya. It's a very great pleasure to once again be able to thank Sharon, who has opened this Beis Medrash, as Judge Friedlander likes to call it, our off-campus site, the Beis Medrash of the SDC, and there's always a special magic here. A warm mazel tov to our devoted and regular attendee, Mr. Backrack, who has just added another great granddaughter, another jewel to his crown, King Yirbu, and may they all continue to have nachas from you. As always, I feel the tremendous debt of gratitude to the SDC, to the Spuyten Duyvil Congregation, Bais Sholom, and to our holy leader and landlord, Judge and Mindy Friedlander, for the umbrella of safety and welcome which they have created for many, but especially for me, and for the opportunity under that umbrella to share Torah with you. For today's shiur is another in that occasional series when I dip into the writings of Rabbi Yitzchak Hutner, the Pachad Yitzchok, who has a special proximity to our tzibur because he was the Rebbe of Rabbi Sholom Reuben Zecher Tzadik Livracha, whom our Beis Medrash is named, and so we are, in a sense, in Rav Hutner's shadow all the time, and today in particular. Today I would like to undertake the discussion of Amalek. Part of the problem in discussing Amalek is there is a strong tendency, particularly in times when the news is not encouraging vis-a-vis the safety of the Jews in the world, to make a simple equation between Amalek and anti-Semitism, and that the implacable hatred of the Jews is the target of the mitzvah of Machol Timches Zecher Amalek, the obligation to obliterate Amalek. Unfortunately, were we to revisit history and to burn down all of the houses in which we have known pain, the human race would probably be restricted to 3 Zulu huts in a swamp somewhere, because there are very few places, certainly on the western side of the world, there are very few places where Jews have not known, in some form or another, the scourge of anti-Semitism. Let us not forget that even in the United States, lynchings were not reserved exclusively for African Americans, and Jews have been lynched here as well. And so, despite the fact that we think of this as the Medinas HaChesed, the land of loving kindness as far as Jews are concerned, and by and large it has been, nevertheless, were we to go back with all of our grudges, as I say, there are a few places that would be that would have a clean bill of health. However, I believe that Amalek is something far more expansive, and what I would argue, based on the Pachad Yitzchok, who is actually the victim of Amalek? Now, the target of Amalek is the Jewish people. But as we will construct, I'm sort of giving you the punchline first. The victims of Amalek are the nations of the world. Because if you carefully read the Shira, which has been included in our liturgy each and every day. The liturgy, the Shira refers quite explicitly to the impact that the miracles of Egypt, and particularly the splitting of the sea, had on others. Mentions Edom, mentions Moab, mentions the Canaanites, right? Each of them was somehow stopped in their tracks and recognized that this moment, when the God of Israel re-enters history, when he demonstrates that he is not that absent watchmaker who put a world together and then lost interest, but rather that he continues to watch the world and to demand that it return to a spirit of righteousness, to a spirit of justice and mercy. That moment alarmed them. And there is a kind of a parallel. What history was supposed to have been, what history was supposed to have been, was a revelation of the Torah to the Jewish people, a banishment of mortality from the world, a rolling back, so to speak, from the sins of the garden, and then a humanity united around this Mamleches Kohanim V'Goy Kadosh. A humanity harmonized. And it seems as if we were on the brink of some kind of success, as evidenced by the impact that our exodus had on all of these other peoples. We, as they say, had their attention. And that attention was manifest in the fact that at the very least, none of them would dare touch Israel. When Amalek comes along, and we'll review the language of the, or we can pass out the sheets if you want. I will be referring to them, but you probably can listen without them. But I will make a few references to them, and you can use them for review. In that moment when Amalek dared to break the spell, the real victims, I separate victims from targets, the victims were the other members of the human family, who would now have to wait until the end of days, would have to wait until the fulfillment of the prophecies of Zephaniah, the prophecies of Zechariah, would have to wait until then to be integrated into the positive and the larger vision. I bring to your attention the beautiful formulation of Rashi on the word Shema Yisrael, right, in Parshas Vayeschanan, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, which we think of as perhaps the most specifically Jewish declaration of faith. And Rashi there says, Hashem Shehu Elokeinu Ato. For the moment, He is our God alone. V'lo Elokei ha'umos. But not yet the sovereign of the other nations of the world. However, U'osid lios Hashem echad. But in the future, the destiny is it will be one God, shenemar, ki oz ha'foch el amin safa berura likro kulam b'shem Hashem, the prophet Zephaniah. I will call the other nations to a clear expression, all of them calling on the name of God. V'nemar bayom hahu Hashem echad u'shmo echad. And then on that day, the name of God will be one. So what do we have? We have the entire course of history. From the moment which was supposed to be the initiation, from the beginning or the restart. You know, I don't know how we ever managed to interpret Chumash before the invention of the computer. Because there are so many metaphors that seem to me to be, I don't know, just so apt in, no pun intended. So what really happens with the Exodus and what follows it, that is the rebooting of humanity. It's a reboot. It's a start again from the hopes and aspirations of Genesis. And that could have been it. That could have been it. But Amalek interferes. And there is that distraction, that loss of focus, that relinquishment of the clarity that Yetzias Mitzrayim, that the Exodus had brought about. And so humanity is doomed to fumble in error until the end of days. So, as compared with what I would consider a rather narrow and parochial understanding of Amalek as anti-Semitism, what we are leaning toward is an interpretation of Amalek as the enemies of human destiny. It is those who fumble in the darkness, who have explored every other alternative. It is they who suffer most.
Why is Kriyat Yamsuf considered more impressive than Dam or Tzfardeo or Kenan, which Paro wasn't adequately impressed with?
That's very interesting. What is the peculiar power of Kriyat Yamsuf? I really like to think about that. Perhaps because the sea is considered such a mighty element. The fact that even the sea responds to a higher authority is something which, it wasn't just a freak. It represented a retrenchment of concepts of majesty. And that's just a kind of on one foot attempt, but I think the question is still better than the answer. So I will perhaps return to the question another time if you permit me. So let's go to the verse in the Torah which actually puts these two elements together. The new beginning of the world. Would someone please make sure that my beloved Senta has a seat?
Oh, yes, I will.
Okay? Front and center. So it turns out that the key verse for the interpretation of Amalek, we can do this. Sharon, I think at the same time, why don't you bring your mother a little closer to the front, because I know she'll hear much better if we can. Why don't we just, Sharon, just bring another chair in here. Here, I'm not using this one.
No, actually, my mom has to stay here.
Okay. Oh, okay. Will this work? Here's another chair.